to get us to another world is untruthful, is inauthentic, is a lie, then the mission fails. And in an even greater sense, nature will not be fooled. Nature will not be lied to. So the point is that if we are a way for the cosmos to know itself, and we have the assets, the resources to do this, then we must. And when I think of the nightmare that we're living at this moment, and the complete lack of any reality, a wood is a wouldn't, and that makes everything okay. We can't let that happen. We just can't afford to let that happen. And so, for me, the joy of Cosmos is reaffirming the power that we have at our disposal if we remain true to ourselves and to nature.
Most of our panel has feet both in the nonfiction and the fiction storytelling world. So I want to ask a question coming at it from someone who's done both, and also, what's the overarching conflict of this series? Because, you know, it's been very dramatic. Every episode has been very dramatic. Drama depends on conflict. So is science the hero of this series? And if science is the hero, is there a villain? And if so, who or what is it?
I think that actually life is the hero of the series. The tenacity of life. It's 4 billion year history on this planet. And who knows how long on other worlds. You know, this is a rare occasion. Science, what we've accomplished with science in a mere 4 centuries, from Galileo's first look through a telescope to venturing beyond the grip of the solar wind into the interstellar medium. 400 years, that's a blink of cosmic time. So the hero, I think, of the series is nature. And the thing that we're up against is people who, or a civilization that makes us hate ourselves for being human and for being natural, and seeks to distort the reality of nature, such as we can, you know, the little approximations of reality that we're able to grasp through the scientific method. So we have heroes in this season, as before, who come up against governments and other kinds of institutions and who really stand up for what's true. Some of them are willing to die for what's true, but none of them are willing to kill for what's true. And that's where the rubber meets the road, is that kind of the courage of the scientists and the stories that we tell about them, and the fact that what they've given us so that we can move out into the cosmos and begin to know a little bit about it.
We can end the panel right there. I think that's we're done. You can't add to that right here. I'm pretty sure.
I have a question for you, though, specifically for you.
Me.
But and Ann can also get into this. You know, I've got kind of geeky reading habits. I read Don Johansson's books, Lucy and Lucy's Family, about his discovery of the Australopithecus fossils at the
Australopithecus efferens.
Yeah. My pronunciation is not badly. And he commented in those books that for scientists like him who go on television and try to do popular science and communicate to the public, that he would get pushback from people who felt that that wasn't serious. So what kind of reaction have you had from the serious scientific community to this work?
That's a great question. We have to go back in time first. let's land in Carl Sagan's era. Carl Sagan got pushed back, yet he pushed back, right? He was in a field of brush and bramble, and intermittently blood gets drawn, but he persisted. And what happened, especially in my field, in astrophysics, people started finding that their members of Congress who represent their districts and their senators saying, oh, you're applying for money for the National Science Foundation to study this? I just learned about that from Carl Sagan on Johnny Carson, or for a book that he just wrote. That's really good stuff. I want to know more of that. Here's more money to do this. And what they found was that when the public knew what the scientists were doing, especially when what they were doing was from tax-based funded sources, all the boats rose. And so it took a while. It didn't happen immediately, but people slowly began to appreciate the actual impact Carl Sagan had in my field. Other fields were sort of less quick to jump on that bandwagon, but I can say he cleared a field that I operate in, and so do so many of my colleagues who have devoted a piece of their lives to bringing science to the public. So I'm on that same field, but there's less brush and bramble, and in some areas there's none at all. And so, yes, I have maintained the respect of my colleagues. Part of it is you want to make sure that credit is given when people give their lives to a space mission and they have 5 minutes on television to talk about it. I'm not going to step in front of them. I live in New York City, the center of 3 people from New York. The center of the news gathering headquarters of the nation. They call me for everything, and I say, did you interview the people at JPL or who just? No, we just want you to talk about it. I said, I'm not talking to you until you send your action cam to the lab that made the discovery. Then you come back to me, and I'll be delighted to tell you. So I become an instrument of the discovery of science, not the point of it. The people who blood, sweat, and tears, the years to get those results are the ones in the sun. And in that capacity, I think I have been warmly received from what I've been able to hear. if they're thinking stuff behind closed doors, I don't know it, but I'm pretty sure I'm doing the right thing, not only for my field, but for science and for society.
So Brannon, you've worked on now science fiction and science fact. What are the lessons of science fiction writing for telling this kind of science fact story?
Well, if you're referring to Star Trek, that Star Trek and Cosmos are cousins of sorts, and that they're both shows about a certain optimistic outlook on what humans are capable of. And we are, to quote Ann Druyan, humans are capable of greatness. And that's really what both shows have ships. Both shows are about exploration. And really the only difference is you can't make crap up on Cosmos. But I kind of feel like my 15 years on Star Trek prepared me for just one season of Cosmos. I mean, that's what it really.
Speaking of space travel television, Seth, you're on one of those shows. What kind of feedback are you getting on Cosmos from your fans of the Orville? And how about the overlap between those two kinds of fans?
There seems to be a lot of overlap, and I think, in a way it's sort of, I mean, look, we are a fictional show, but in a way it sort of speaks to what Neil was talking about. Look, science communication of any kind and fanning the flames of enthusiasm for science is something that should be taken seriously. I mean, without it, you have climate change denial. I mean, it should be much easier to get legislation passed, but there's enough people who don't believe the science. So, look, when I was a kid, there was a lot of positive, optimistic science television in fiction and in nonfiction, and that kind of went away at one point, and I missed it. Everything got very dark, dystopian. We were constantly being told, and still are, that the future is going to be this bleak, horrible place that's only shot with very specific colors, but it's. And there's nothing balancing that on the other side, and I missed that, and you know, it was not lost on me that you know, I would hear stories about engineers or astrophysicists or pilots, you know, people who went into certain fields because of the original Star Trek and other shows like that, because they were excited, and there's nothing like that now. I mean, thank God for Cosmos, but
thank God,
ironically. I use it in the Einsteinian sense. but you know, that I think that's not a small thing, that you know, all the eyeballs that are just seeing darkness on TV in this genre need something to offset it with.
Can I just add quickly to that? I'm old enough to remember the original Star Trek in first run. Oldest person in the room right now. But my point is, in that era, Star Trek was hopeful. There would be the challenges, the drama of conflict, but then at the end, there was a morality tale that was just told, and there was hope for a better future. And in that era, you didn't go more than a week, at most a month, without seeing a cover story in the then newspaper, magazines, Life magazine, Look magazine, Time magazine, that talk about, that extol the virtues of the city of tomorrow, the home of tomorrow, food of tomorrow, clothing of tomorrow. And you knew, implicitly and explicitly, that that could only happen if you embraced the innovations in science and technology and engineering. So there was a fundamental unity of the vision and the tools necessary to make that happen. And to your point, Seth, we now live in a time where people thinking about the future does not contain the rosy side of it. It's all the bleak side. And then they want to blame science for the bleakness, not recognizing that science is the only antidote to all that we are bringing to bear that could bring civilization to an end. So,
yeah. Or at least the only way without our own mass extinction, which seems like an unpleasant alternative.
Correct.
All right, so we're going to do questions from the audience, so start to get those ready. I'm saying don't go to the microphones yet. I have a question for Jason.
Line up the non-existent microphones.
My title these days is producer. And I've learned, being a producer of small editorial videos for Variety, that how much of the details you have to sweat, especially when you are producing something that is supposed to be presenting fact. So tell us about the difference between producing rigorous nonfiction like this versus the fiction that you normally do.
Well, it matters, what we put in front of people has the rigors of our scientific research behind it, and Cosmos takes a little bit of time to create, because in the writing process, Ann and Brannon really delved into the stories that would be meaningful and incredibly inspirational, but at the same time, the rigors of truth, and looking at all the point of views to find the most honest and true pathway to that. So we employ that all the way through the production process, whether it's in the early art phases. We have an incredible head of research, Andre Bermanis, who is connected. We also have...
We love Andre.
Yeah, Andre's amazing. And we also have the leadership of Neil, too. And between that vision that's on the page, which clarifies what we're after, and then this rigorous research, it's easier because it's written. It starts at a place in which the writing has been absolutely detailed from a true place. But we go through layers and iterations of discovery of images, whether that's about, even in the animation team is held to the highest standard, whether they're portraying architecture or the representation of a character who's a real character. We look at all of that detail to kind of create it, and Sam Sagan was involved this season, who was incredibly helpful in defining the truths about these civilizations that we explore in Cosmos this season. So it's very rigorous, but it's also incredibly rewarding, because I really feel that the entire team has their attention on it and on that detail. So
it's a luxury for the Orville too, because the Cosmos offices are literally right the 2 doors down. So
share a lot.
If we have a question about anything, I'll walk into Annie's office or give Neil a call and say, hey, can a terrestrial planet have rings? Stuff like that.
I got a text in the middle of a shot, okay, in the middle of a studio from this guy about a planet orbiting, an exoplanet orbiting another star. And so I guess we're just your extended encyclopedia for this. Well, just in all fairness to Seth, when he was doing TED, the opening scene has the night sky over a suburb of Boston. I got a call to make sure he got that sky correct.
Because you don't want the other call.
This is a call that I did not get from James Cameron when he put the sky over the Titanic.
Maybe that's the easiest part of this, getting it right, is you don't want that call. What is this?
This guy cares about his
James
son.
Cameron tends to half-ass it. It's a joke, Jesus.
All right, let's do a little point-counterpoint. Who wants to volunteer to make the argument for sending humans into space? One person raise their hands in our panel.
Send what?
The argument for sending humans into space. Who wants to? You want to do that one?
Well, there's one particular human I'd like to send into space.
So I have no volunteers. Who wants to make the argument against sending humans into space? I have no volunteers for that either.
I won't even drive to Santa Monica.
Our robots are so efficient and so capable that it seems to me that the risk of human life, when we can send these robots and they are sending our senses, we're developing strategies for resolving the atmospheres and surfaces of the planets of other suns. So in a way, it seems kind of silly, because the travel time for humans at this point, at this moment, although in Cosmos Possible Worlds will glimpse a possible future which will be quite different. But for the moment, the risk of life doesn't make that much sense. On the other hand, there is something about the human engagement and involvement in the drama of the courage of a small group of humans venturing to a new horizon. And that's very compelling. And it might be a much better channel for our testosterone and for the other hormones that motivate us to do things that are destructive. So I can see the argument for sending humans, but I really feel that it's much more for some kind of sociobiological purpose than it is for actual exploration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Consider that no one that I know of has ever given a ticker tape parade for a robot. There's something about the shared vicarious participation of an audience with one of our own species who experiences the great travels. This has gone on ever since we had the great voyages across the oceans. The hero would come back and tell the stories of those travels. That has value for our inspiration, for the next generation. And I'm disappointed with my colleagues who, in my generation, many of whom became astrophysicists because of the Apollo program, yet today are saying, oh, we don't need to send people, we'll just send the robot, denying a next generation of having the heroes that they had to get them interested in the field itself. So,
I want to ask everybody about the morality of risking contaminating worlds that might already have life. Now, I got a guy I know from my covering visual effects, a guy named Tim Sassoon. He's got a great Facebook feed, mostly science, you should all follow it. He's always on this, about how offended he is at the idea of things like The Martian, where Matt Damon creates a farm using human night soil and plants potatoes on a planet that might have life.
Right.
So how great a risk is that, and how can we guard against that? What's our moral obligation to ecosystems that are alien to us?
we're there already.
But we don't have to keep doing it.
No, sorry. NASA has an entire office within itself that concerns that shapes missions to destinations based on the likelihood of it having life that we might then study later. And we want to say.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt you. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are 5 categories of worlds according to the NASA conventions and the International Space Agency conventions. The worlds that you can go to. For instance, it was possible to crash Cassini into Saturn because it was deemed a Category 1 world, in which whatever conceivable microbes, tardigrades that could have, still been on the spacecraft would have been destroyed before they could do any harm. And it was unlikely that there was any life form there that it could disturb. But then there are Category 5 worlds. The reason that Cassini had to be destroyed was because there was a Category 5 moon, very too close, which if very tiny odds, Cassini had crashed into Enceladus.
Enceladus, yeah.
Then that would have been a violation of these conventions. So there has been some thought given to this, and
So your friend he thinks it's a problem, but we've solved it and we're on to other problems right now. We've been there. But you remember when the Apollo astronauts went into the containment vehicle?
Yeah.
Just in case.
They don't do that anymore.
No, we don't do that anymore because the moon. Well, because we're not going to the moon anymore. But that's why we don't do that anymore. But the moon, based on any knowledge we have of life, is completely sterile. And if there's a sterile environment, you don't worry about it. If there's one that might have had life and you could contaminate it because somebody sneezed on your vessel before you sent it there, and there are microbes that could, the alien could get the flu, you protect against that.
Wasn't there an episode of Cosmos that you wrote that dealt with the seeding of this planet by possible microbes that came from collisions of
yes,
stars?
absolutely, yes. Yeah. That remains a very
so it could happen naturally.
Hypothesis. I can't resist adding that it was Carl who was responsible for the quarantine on the Apollo mission, and all the astronauts really hated him for that reason. Because when they came home, they had to sit in this kind of FEMA trailer for like 3 weeks or 2 weeks where they could be reunited with their families. But Carl was extremely conservative in this area. He really believed that our knowledge was so limited that we should err on the side of the most extreme caution. Yeah.
All right, I want to shift gears a little bit. So the show this year is Cosmos, Possible Worlds. I want to ask about some famous worlds from science fiction. Possible, impossible? What's your take on this? I'm going to start with Brannon. Tatooine from Star Wars. How do you feel about when you look at Tatooine, do you think that's a possible world?
I think Encino. Possible. Yeah. It's a desert planet. Sure. Right? That's the cool of sand people? No. I got that wrong?
Yeah, no, it's the same.
Okay, all right.
Panic in your eyes.
Don't get that wrong in this audience, okay?
He's been toiling in real science.
All right, Jason. Jason, you're up. Dagobah from Star Wars.
I have no idea.
No.
I think there are so many planets out there that anything is truly possible. And obviously, it depends on when you visit them. A billion years from now, this planet will be different, and a billion years ago, it was different. So I think all of it has an opportunity to be possible. So yes.
All right, Seth, I've got one for you. Pandora from Avatar.
From what?
Avatar.
Yeah, I mean, with enough of a budget, yeah, I think it's possible.
All right, I'm going to throw one at Ann. I don't know how much of a Star Trek fan you are, but the Mirror Universe from Star Trek?
Wow. Well, actually, we have a mirror universe in the new season of Cosmos. And yeah, I mean, I actually am not that familiar with the mirror universe.
Is there an evil Neil?
I'm sorry.
You know, this is the year.
Wow, he's got the mustache.
But
Right, Star Trek Discovery fans?
no, but it is true that we explore the notion of the multiverse, which is all universes that consist of every possible permutation. You know, you do take the bus, you don't take the bus, that's a whole new universe. And so, yeah, I'm sure that, knowing if it was from the original Star Trek, there was probably a nucleus of a great scientific idea at the heart of it.
Neil, I got one for you. From Men in Black, The Galaxy. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, the galaxy on the belt of Orion.
That's right.
Yeah. Orion the cat. So here's the problem with that.
Let's go. Come on, Neil.
It was imagined 100 years ago or so as we started probing into the atom, and we discovered, oh my gosh, there's a nucleus and particles orbiting it, like a solar system. And is it that way all the way down, and could it be that way all the way up? And what we discovered is that as you go to the small, the laws of physics manifest differently and affect matter differently than they do in the large. And this is the difference between relativity, general relativity, Einstein's theory of gravity, and quantum physics. They manifest differently on those two different scales. So it's not just a scaling relation all the way down. And inside the atom, we've been inside the atom. We've been inside the proton. We've been inside the neutron. There are quarks there. We've found fundamental particles. There's not like a solar system inside the quark. So, no, there is no galaxy. I just have to say, because I'm usually quite critical of the Star Wars franchise, I want to say that in the Star Wars episode 4, the first of the series, it was Luke comes out and he sees a double sunset. That is the only scientifically accurate thing in all the Star Wars. It was more than half the stars you see in the night sky are double in multiple star systems, and no one had thought to put a planet around any of them. And so the fact that this was portrayed in Star Wars, I just give a shout out to that exercise in bringing the rest of the star family into the storytelling that unfolded. And by the way, you can't have a stable orbit, this is inside baseball here, you can't have a stable orbit if the stars are too far apart, because your orbital allegiance would get challenged depending on where you are. Those two stars were close enough together so that this planet's orbit would orbit them both and see gravitationally only one object, and thereby keep a stable orbit. So it even got that right.
We have about 10 minutes left. This is the time we would like to go to questions from the audience. Over here.
Dr. Tyson and Mr. MacFarlane. as an educator, I'm on the front lines trying to get students to care about
But
science.
you're an educator.
And daily, I'm fighting battles where students tell me it's not important to read, or that their parents have said, and this is one that is driving me nuts, that the earth is flat. And when students go home and they're in a household for 16 hours, that they're not in the classroom, they're not educating, and it's not important. Your shows are important, and Cosmos are important, and you're showing them. What else can I do?
Give up now. Escape while you can. Let me just give a quick answer. Seth might have more to add to that. I've thought about this problem, and
You can start with a flaming turd on the front stoop. And
the fact that there's a rise in the flat Earth movement, to me, is evidence of two things. One, we live in a country that protects free speech. Two, we have a failed educational system. Okay, it's evidence of those two things. Now, I think, as an educator, what you need to think of is not only what body of information are you transferring to your students. Information is good, but it is only a fraction of what is ultimately most important to a person. What's most important to a person is training them how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. Don't know how to think. How data become information, and how information becomes knowledge. Now knowledge becomes wisdom. That arc is something that I don't think is taught in school, because you're handed a syllabus by a county board and they say, have them learn this and then have them regurgitate it back, then we deem them educated. Well, in fact, if they learn nothing but how to think, then when they graduate, they become lifelong learners, and they'll learn much more than you could have ever taught them in the first place.
Next in line.
My name's Rick, and I'm a middle school science teacher. Dr. Tyson, you're a personal hero of mine. I'm wondering if you would consider running for president in 2020. Tyson 9, 2020.
So the answer is no. But it's not that I haven't thought about why my answer is no. I'll just tell you that if people are disgruntled with their leaders, consider that there are people out there, fellow citizens,